What changed the way you see your father? My father was never big on negative emotions. He was always around for a laugh and joined in every happy thing. But if it was about bad things, sadness, negative emotions, he was just completely silent. He simply refused to speak in such situations. As I'm the paperwork human in the family, they once asked me to sort the paperwork of his mother. I knew my grandfather was put into a concentration camp without a good reason. But reading pledges of clemency, or in other words a child begging for the life of his father, no, it wasn't successful. In the handwriting of my 11Y/0 father to the police broke my heart. After the tears dried, I understood why he was simply not able to talk about negative emotions. It must have been removed from him in these days. Fucking hell. Sorry that happened. Much love to you, your dad and your family. We buried my father a while ago, but it made me understand this part of him better than anything else. He always stressed how important it is to understand how wonderful it is to live in peacetime, as his own childhood was taken away. I never worked out with my dad as a big guy. One day I did in my 20s, and I was lifting more weight. Learned two things. One, my dad was getting older, which made me sad. Superman was starting to grade too. His effort at everything he does is always 100%. This but with wrestling. At 21 I started to hold my own, and I think my dad realized that he would lose if he held back at all. By 23 or 24 I had to start going easy on him. Man, it's tough seeing dads get old. When I realized what alcoholism looks like, how could you tell? I've recently been thinking about him being alcoholic, but I can't tell. I work with my dad, and he tried to hide it, but he slurs a lot when he's into it. He also forgot about a lot of stuff and would fall asleep during the workday. His MLs and demeanor on general is different when he's sober versus drunk. One day in my mid-20s we got drunk together and had a heart-to-heart. He told me his side of the story of his marriage to my mother and how she cheated on him and how he just bore it and went to work to earn money even in the face of her not hiding it. I was too little to understand at the time. Always thought he was just distant and too stoic to show feelings. He cared too much about me to let the abuse get in the way of him earning money for us. Edit for Grandma. I hope you gave him a call after typing that. When my aunt told us that as a child he was tied up in the basement and beaten by his parents, my grandmother would tell my grandfather to hit him again. Hit him again. Apostrophe. He handled that abuse better than most. He turned in on himself mostly and turned to alcohol to cope. Things also changed a lot when he apologized to me. My dad was not awful to me, but my mother was. My dad just wasn't around a lot dealing with his demons. And by then my parents were divorced. So he told me at one point that he was sorry. He didn't know how bad it was with my mom. I don't even know how he learned it was bad. Maybe my siblings told him when I ran away and was a missing person for a little bit. But I have no idea. Close bracket. I'll never understand how people can have children just to use them as punching bags and to take all of their own life failures into them. My grandparents were godly people trying to ensure their child did not go to hell or be influenced by the devil. They were very wrong, but their horrific acts came from a place of love. I can't be angry at them. People in this world are either showing love or crying out for it. My dad had a very difficult upbringing, and while he always told me he loved me and was affectionate, I didn't really get how proud of me he was until the day after I graduated from high school. He woke me up with breakfast in bed, my diploma in his hand, tears in his eyes. He told me he was so proud of me and that he hadn't graduated high school. I hadn't known this previously because he didn't want me to feel pressure to do things just because he hadn't. I saw him as someone other than just my dad for the first time. A guy with hopes and dreams and fears all his own. He's a great guy. I'm lucky that has my dad. Years after my mom died we were chatting after having a few drinks, and though he's not an emotional person at all, he opened up a bit. 4 years all I thought about was the fact that I lost my mom. But he said that day he lost the love of his life, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. How selfish I was that I never saw he had lost the person he had chosen to spend his life with. I don't believe that makes you selfish. It makes you the child of someone who hollered and was loved deeply by you. Remarkably, you both loved this woman. Man, as spouse and child, and grieved the loss. Seeing him for a man whom loved your mother so deeply is beautiful. Full. We can't all say that. Being there the day he got word his mother was dying of cancer, I'd seen the man tear up a lot throughout the years, but had never seen him sob. That was when I realized we're all just children. When I lost my mother, several years after my father, I was in my 40s and my wife pretty much laughed at me. About 10 years after my mother had died, she had lost her mother and father as well. Over 5 years between them. She said the exact same thing to me. Neither of our kids ever met my father. We waited too long to have kids, and he died before both of them were born, and I will regret that until my dying day. Bro, she laughed at you for crying. Why would she remain your wife? Sounds more like an enemy. I lost all respect for a girl for saying my dog is just a dog when he died. In the last 5 years of his life he saw his wife, my mom, die, and suffered a stroke a couple years later. Watching a man Holler choose to be a confident go-getter slowly go to pieces over that time was the hardest thing I ever had to TCH. Part of it is, when I grew up and left the house, he started treating me different, in a good way. I'm blessed with parents Harlot cut for me enough to discipline me when growing up, and be actual pair. NTS. But since I've been out on my own it's been different. And they started treating me like an adult and close friend Harlot cared for, rather than parental figures. Me too. I ran away from home at 18, but was able to mend things with them, and it was probably the best thing I could have done for our relationship. My dad even said he was proud of me for living my life on my own terms. Makes me really happy. I'm glad you had a similar experience. Getting glasses. That helped a lot. Appreciate the dad joke in the thread asking about dads. That my dad spent a lot of time teaching himself calculus in the hopes that when I was struggling, which I did frequently, I would reach out to him and he would be able to help. But I was always too prideful to ask for help. I didn't know he was doing that until a few years after, and it broke my heart to know that he put in the time to learn, and I never came to him for help. I understand the negative emotions you feel around this, and while they're valid, I'd encourage you to focus on the positives of it. I don't know the kind of brain your dad had, but calculus is hard, especially to be self-taught. Whether you went to him or not is irrelevant at this point. It was really cool of him to make sure he could be there if you needed, and I hope he was proud of you for handling it, even if it caused you to struggle. When you found out, did you tell him how much that means to you? If he's still around, you might remind him. I know that would melt my heart to hear from my kid. Have always had a lot of self-doubt. Always thinking everybody can do anything, and I could do nothing. Always thought I was hiding it really well and not complain, because who'd want to know? And maybe even more afraid that someone would confirm it to be indeed the truth. When I left to go to university, my dad drove me to the train station, and while we were waiting for the train to arrive, he out of the blue said, "You know, when I went to university my granddad told me, if other people can do it, so can we." Made me realize he had been having the same feelings, and his granddad before him. I grew up in a large, happy home. I have 6 siblings. My father was very religious. We were Russian Orthodox. My dad was a deacon in the choir and involved in religious education programs at our church. After I went away to university, I eventually came out to the family. Everyone was very supportive. My father eventually was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. During his final year, when I was up for the holidays, he wanted to get together for dinner. I agreed. My father disclosed that he was molested by his stepfather as a child and had been secretly in the closet for years. He explained how proud he was of me for coming out and being myself, while regretting that he never had the courage to do so, but that he would never trade his family for anything. I was stunned, to say the least. He passed away shortly thereafter, and I plan to take the information to my grave. I've always had a good relationship with my dad, but I've never once seen him cry or get emotional. Several months ago, my brother attempted suicide. Dad acted like nothing was really wrong, going about life as he had before everything happened. Mum and I were a mess. I was so confused why he didn't seem to care. But that night, I heard him crying in the middle of the night. We ended up having a big family chat where we all cried and were brutally honest with each other. There was a lot of pain on all ends about what had happened, and we needed to let my brother know that we loved him and were all there for him. Something that he hadn't realized at the time. An awful situation. But we are all closer now, and my brother is doing well. We had a shitty car at the time, drove on cooking gas, and it was fettled by him all the time, just maintaining it so it would be drivable. One day we were replacing the brake pads, and I was amazed how, no matter how crap the car looked, he was always keen on safety. The very next day, he was driving me and my brother to school, and we end up in a fast row and the first car brakes due to some dumbass pedestrian passing the road without looking. We stop hard and get rear-ended. I remember having a backpack on my back while sitting, and it stopped the umbrella from the trunk. It was a hatchback. I could have gotten a serious injury. Anyway, the guy that hit us said it's his fault, obviously, because he was in a hurry. His son had cerebral paralysis and his surgery was scheduled for that day. The second he heard that we pushed both cars off the road and my dad borrowed a car from my uncle and drove them to the hospital, he said he wanted no money and that he should call him when the surgery is successful. The next day he thanked my dad on the phone, while me and him pulled the car back into shape. It is the most proud I have ever been of someone. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.